swear words into the Chronicles of Narnia. What with the parcels and the snow, it looked just as if he had been doing his Christmas shopping. He was a fawn, and when he saw Lucy, he gave such a start of surprise that he dropped all his parcels. Me, exclaimed the fawn. The queen discovers.
That might be my favorite one.
What are you? Said the queen again. Are you an overgrown dwarf? No, your majesty, said Edmund. I never had a beard. I'm a boy. A boy? Do you mean you're a fucking son of Adam? And they find out Edmund lied about being here with Lucy before. So you really were here, Peter said? That time Lou said she met you in here and you made out she was telling lies? There's a dead silence. Well, of all the fucking poisonous little fucking bitch beasts, said Peter. Gotta get an Aslan one in there. So Aslan's talking to the White Witch. You have a traitor here, Aslan, said the witch. Well, his offense was not against you, said Aslan. Have you forgotten the deep magic? Asked the witch. Let us say I have forgotten it, bitch. Gravely. Tell us of this fucking deep magic. This is a review of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Let's get going.
Oh, welcome everyone to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe read-along, a Narnia read-along like you've never seen. Oh, this is your channel, though. Why am I introducing? Go ahead.
Thanks, Andy, for that wonderful cold open.
Man's channel. Oh, boy.
Well, we are reading Narnia. Just kidding. Man, what was that last night, huh? Chatting with Nuts. We were just getting... No one wants to read Narnia.
Oh, man. Oh, I have receipts for your audience. I wanna show how Rid talks about us behind our backs, guys, on Jimmy Nuts.
You know what? Actually, what happens on Chatting with Nuts stays with stays on Chatting with Nuts. So let's not go there.
I tried to defend the Narnia read along, and my partner in Narnia read along sold us out on the Jimmy Show.
Well, I really liked this book. I think, talking with you about it a little bit before the stream, I think I'm slightly less positive, but I think that's good. I think it'll be interesting to see where we agree and where we disagree, because if we both just agreed on it, it would have been, I think, a little less fun to discuss. But what are your sort of initial impressions of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? And when was the last time that you read the book?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I reread the Narnia books in college, but as I was reading this book, I think I skipped Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe because it's like the most known. It's kind of the most boring. It is also the heaviest hand, and even at that point, my college, I went to an evangelical college. I was very evangelical Christian at that point in my life. Mm-hmm. So like the themes obviously were like, it's not something that graded against me, but even then I was like, it's a little like, I don't know. So all that to say is I think I skipped Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe and went right to Prince Caspian. So I think the last time I actually like sat down and read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by myself was probably in middle school. Because this will be my, depending on the book, third or fourth time through. Because like my dad read them to me when I was very young.
Okay.
And then I read them for myself the first time in middle school. And then when I was in college, I went back, as I was studying theology and kind of wanted to get, and I'd read some of C.S. Lewis's like apologetics and sort of like more mature works. And I was like, I want to go see him again. And so this is the first time that I will have done this kind of like post my Christian era, as Taylor would say. And so, what the initial question was kind of what was my basic thoughts reading it this time.
Yeah.
But I really liked it. I was surprised at how like quickly I just got back into like, yeah, this is magical. This is so fun. It's a fairy tale. I really, really liked how C.S. Lewis, his narrator voice is. And there was some really good discussion in our Discord server because sometimes that just didn't work for people. Because C.S. Lewis, if people are watching this and haven't read the book, it's very much like you're reading, like you go to a library reading and there's a guy who's really good at telling stories reading the book to you. Like he addresses the audience every once in a while. He gives like modern metaphors or analogs for like kids to understand what's going on. And for me, that just really felt like, maybe it's because it's connected specifically to my childhood, but like it felt very like whimsical. and I really enjoyed that. And each chapter, I read this very slowly, basically a chapter, I think like every like 3 or 4 nights. Like if I just like was not super tired but ready to go to bed, I might read it real quick before bed. And it just like was a great time. I really enjoyed it. So that was kind of my experience. I have a lot of criticisms. I have my long review tomorrow is about 20 minutes long, and I think like 12 of it is like criticisms or things that I think are worth talking about and reflecting on the book now. But like at a core of like a really good children's literature book, I think it was really good. It got for me kind of my second highest level of endorsement, which is like universal recommend, meaning I think anyone could read this and have a good time. They might have various, levels of good time, but I think anyone could read it. That was kind of my review. How about you? Well, and also tell me how many times you've read it and what you thought this time through.
This was my second time reading it. The first time I read it was in 5th grade, and I remember very vividly because the classroom had the Scholastic editions of Narnia that I think everyone who's my age, sort of like Gen Z millennial cusps, will remember that. And I remember when I read it the first time, I really loved Narnia, but that was also my era of when I would read books, and if it had magic in it and if it had witches and talking animals and swords, I would be like, oh, I love this. And as an adult, I think reading it, I have a lot of thoughts about the sort of morality that C.S. Lewis espouses in this book. But at the same time, I totally agree with you when it comes to like the imagery of some of the very iconic scenes, like Lucy stumbling through the wardrobe, and even the lamppost in Narnia, that very like weird anachronistic, like why is there a lamppost in the center of a forest like that? I love that, and the fairy tale aspect of it, and the talking animals. And I think it was almost more interesting for me to finish reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and then look up C.S. Lewis. So I've been like reading a bunch of articles about Lewis in like the New York Review of Books, and then reading like I found this one. It was like a study, or not a study, like a published paper by someone who like collated all of the mentions of Tolkien talking about C.S. Lewis, because there's only really one like definitive thing that Tolkien himself said about C.S. Lewis, but there's all these other sources where it's like other people who talked to Tolkien saying what Tolkien told them. And it's this really interesting conversation that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis had with one another. And yeah, it's just been fascinating to learn about Lewis and Tolkien's relationship, because I didn't realize that C.S. Lewis was sort of like a later convert to Christianity. Like obviously he grew up Christian, but I think he was like atheist at some point. And then it was his relationship with Tolkien that like reinvigorated his love for Christianity. And like Tolkien was the one who like opened his eyes to the beauty of like Christian mythology and that kind of thing. And anyways, I'm going on a really long tangent now. Yeah, I think that the book itself, I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it when I was a child, but it's so interesting to read in terms of like its context in the genre and things like that.
Yeah, and that the relationship between Tolkien and Lewis is a very like interesting thought experiment of different ways to view kind of that Christian mythology and storytelling. And they were in a writers or like a literature association for a little while called the Inklings that met at a pub called the Eagle and Child, which I've been to. It no longer exists. It closed during COVID, unfortunately, but yeah, it's quite clear that like Tolkien also certainly he takes a lot of inspiration from a lot of mythology, but also Christian mythology, certainly. But Lewis does so much more aggressively, which, in children's literature is always a little bit more obvious than adult literature. But yeah, what did you like rate it? I know you normally don't rate books. How would you say like it falls within your continuum of experience?
I know. I took the milquetoast route. So I do rate books on Goodreads. And I did not rate it on Goodreads.
Okay.
I think so. It's hard for me to rate because I think if I was just rating it based off of my enjoyment of it, it would be like a 3 star, which is like not a bad book by any means. It's like a solid
Yeah.
book, but I don't feel like it's fair to rate it 3 stars based on my like sort of current ephemeral like reading of it, because it's like, oh well, this was just like how I was feeling at the moment when I was reading it. When I read it, I feel like I'm more appreciating it for what it did, and like its influences. So I feel like you can't rate a book like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's like sort of, it doesn't make sense to do it.
Yeah. And it's also like, especially when you're rating a book in our space, which is primarily we do fantasy, but even like contemporary fiction, like it feels like a bigger deal because there was a lot of time put into it. I don't know, something because of it was like, for me, this was such a small time commitment and it's a very easy book to read. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like rating, I don't know, Dagger and Coin, which you just did. Like that's a big time commitment. You know, it's a big whatever. This is like, it's like a little itty bitty guy. Yeah. Okay, let's like talk through the book. I feel like it's quick enough that we can kind of go through the whole thing, summarizing, and also like there's no spoilers for this book. Everyone knows.
Yeah.
Unless, did you want to get to any particular theme or something first, or go through the story?
We can do that. I just wanted to say hi to people in the chat. Magus Markellen, thanks for chatting with us in the Discord as well. That was really fun. We had a lot of fun insights come out of that. Some guy called Used Chicken is in the chat.
The weird username. I don't know about that.
Thank you for showing up, Nathaniel. Yeah, it's interesting that the style of narration is sort of gone out of fashion, and it used to be not just fantasy, but like if you read Jane Eyre, like Charlotte Bronte will address the reader. Like one of the most famous lines in Jane Eyre is the "Dear reader, I married him," which spoilers, but you know, like that used to be a thing that authors did, and it's really interesting because nowadays I feel like people really try to focus more on immersion in reading, and it's like they want you to be the character or like be as immersed as possible and like not even know that you're reading a book.
Yeah. I think the one exception in modern fantasy that I can think of is Ken Liu, especially the Dandelion Dynasty.
I've not read it.
So that is told very purposefully from a more like oral storytelling like tradition, obviously in the East, like that generally you tell stories like verbally, and so it's a different kind of storytelling, and some people kind of, if you're not used to it, it is sort of, it's very different from Western storytelling, but it is yeah, he does that as well. Well, where he'll kind of step out of the story, tell you some stuff, or like, you know, as you said in Jane Eyre, like address you directly, like, dear reader, I wouldn't tell you, this or this or this, but like this is actually what happened, or I want to tell you this, but actually this is the next thing that happened in the story. I remember very clearly at one point he kind of says like, we could pretend that this happens, but that's not what happened. Dandelion Nights is really great. I think you really like it, but that's the one thing I can think of in sort of modern storytelling that does have this sort of I don't know, strong narrator voice is what I've been saying. I don't know if that's the right, like, correct literary criticism term, but
yeah, no, I think that is the way where it's like having even a narrator voice is interesting, because I feel like someone like Sanderson does not really have a like sort of style or tone. It's almost like words. Yeah. The Rogue says Tolkien was disappointed he didn't become a Catholic, from what I understand. And yeah, I also was reading stuff about, I find that so interesting that they were friends and that they like really pushed and pulled on each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And in England, especially, they both were parts of like kind of like Christian minorities at the time, right? Like evangelical Christians, primarily. It's like Church of England is obviously like the Anglican Church would be like the mainstream. Evangelicals have never been huge in England. And then obviously Roman Catholics usually also have not been like a religious minority in England, more so in Ireland. But
Yeah. So was C.S. Lewis was an evangelical?
They would claim him as such. He was, I think he did go to like a Church of England church. I would say that like his proclivities kind of lean a little bit more sort of like modern evangelical.
Interesting. Yeah, we can talk more about that, but I find it interesting that he was sort of like a later in life convert and how that differs from someone who was like sort of like Tolkien, who was always Catholic, if that makes sense. Like sort of like having the zeal of a convert is interesting and how that shows up in his work.
Yeah. And I will say C.S. Lewis, if you've read any of his like apologetic works or his more like broader like Christian works, is actually a very good writer. He's very persuasive, which is why he's still a favorite of a lot of evangelicals today.
Aslan is Jesus? Question mark.
Spoilers, Javi.
Yeah, it's hard to rate, and there are a lot of different lenses to look at it. And yeah, I totally see someone rating it 5 stars for nostalgic reasons, for like personal reasons. I mean, even like it is a good book. I rate it 3 stars for my sort of personal enjoyment.
Do you remember, Red? Do you remember like the other Chronicles of Narnia?
I do, and I really like some of the later books where it gets into the like when they're in the world between the worlds. I've always found that really fascinating. And
Magician's Net is great. That might be my favorite.
yes, and I'm very excited to get to those. You said last night actually that Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe is your least favorite, and I think it might. I'm surprised that it's might be my least favorite as well this time around.
That I should have said second least favorite because I do think the last battle, although the last battle is, I don't know if you remember, I remember it very little, but like
I don't
it's
remember.
the most Christian-y because it's like the end of the world.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of, I even remember like as a Christian reading, I was like, this is kind of, ooh, like it feels kind of like very judgmental
Mm.
the whole way through.
Yeah.
Whereas even like Lion Witch Wardrobe, I think like is mostly like a positive story. Like people are, you know, being saved or whatever. Last battle. But yes, Lion Witch, but like the imagery and like the stuff I think that you said that like you like the lamppost in the forest, the weird stuff that happens, like it just gets better. Like Prince Caspian is also like a little better, but then like Voyage of the Dawn Treader, so good. The Horse and His Boy, Silver Chair, like weird shit starts happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Javi's talking about. I have not read The Grace of Kings. I know it's a gap in my reading. Partly, which Nat is talking about here, is Nat read Grace of Kings and did not like it. So usually when Nat doesn't like something, I will follow lead.
Nat is a bad influence. What I would say is, so he's right. The dialogue is very like people just don't talk like people talk, but I think that the style is consistent enough that once you get in the rhythm of it, it really works because it is very different. Like if, you know, it's kind of like people in a play. Like sometimes people in a play say stuff because it's a play, right? They're like, oh, over yonder, there's a large ship that like no one would ever say, but like it's necessary because it's a play. I feel like Daniel Knight does that. And if you can get into the rhythm, the story is strong enough to make it worthwhile. But it is very particular.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's start going through the plot of the book where the children arrive to this massive mansion in the country, and you talked about how you really like how quickly C.S. Lewis establishes the scene, and I agree. I think that the pace of this book is so fast, and I think in certain parts that bothers me, but in the beginning, I think it's perfect. It's just like you get into the rhythm of the flow of the story, and the children are exploring this house, and it feels very idyllic and fairy tale like.
And it's just so quick. Like by the way, I was thinking about that. So Rid mentioned that I mentioned this. My review is going to drop tomorrow, and I've never done this before, but I sent a preview to read so she could see kind of what I think of it. I don't know. That felt very secretive and big time, but it wasn't really that cool. But anyway, all I was saying is, it's like the first paragraph is like they go on a train, they're isolated, and there's a great example of like what I was talking about, where like it's an easy way for kids to kind of latch onto things, because he says it's 2 miles from the nearest post office and 10 miles from the nearest rail station, which like most kids who like live in large cities, that's like, whoa, because a post office is down the street and a rail station is within walking distance. I just love like how quickly he's able to go on. And the same is true with when he's describing the house. It's like one paragraph, but he's like, they went down one flight of stairs and then down 2 others and up 1 more. And just something about the way he describes it, even as a kid, I remember, and even now, like as an adult, I was like, this house is so cool. Like I want to play hide and go seek in this house. And then that's what they do, and it just creates place so quickly.
Yeah. And it reminded me of being a kid and being like wanting to explore a house, because I feel like that was something I totally would have done, is arrive at this new place and be like, oh, I wonder, like I always had like a sort of like proclivity for like magical thinking, I guess. And I would have always like arrive in a place and be like, oh, I wonder if there's like a magical wardrobe here. And I liked getting put in that mindset.
If you read this as a kid, I think you probably have a story at some point of seeing like a wardrobe or a weird closet and being like, wait a minute, is this the time?
Yeah. And just like the pretend of like, even, like the play of it was it's kind of timeless. Like kids, I hope kids today are still like that, where they come to a new place and start exploring. But yeah. Then
the other thing I wanted to mention was like the cool thing, just like historically about Chronicles of Narnia, is like this is kids who are running away from the bombing of London during World War II. Like this is what was happening to a lot of children in England. They literally would send them out, and people would volunteer in the country to take kids from London because so many bombs were being dropped by the German Air Force during World War II. And these are being written in the 50s. And so this is just after World War II. I mean, the kids who are being read this by their fathers are fathers who fought in World War II. And in the 50s, there was huge food shortages throughout Europe. So like this, the book takes place in a very like particular time and place where like the idea of escaping into another world is like a very like powerful one. And it is so interesting. Kind of another strength of the book is how it is tied to our world very strongly, at least in line with the wardrobe, that I find quite fascinating to like keep in the back of your mind as you're reading this book.
Yeah. And I think, so I haven't been keeping up with the adaptation, but there's been a lot of discussion of, because some set pictures leaked, and it seems like Gerwig may be shifting around the timeline, and a lot of people are upset with that. I'm not gonna form an opinion, because who knows what those pictures actually mean, and like when the movie comes out, I'll judge it based on that. But yeah, I think the first book at least is very tied to its place in history, and so it would be interesting to see if she moves around the timeline a little bit.
I love Greta Gerwig, so whatever she wants to do. I love Lady Bird. It's one of my all-time faves. Frances Ha, which she wrote with her now husband Noah Baumbach before, is so good. Little Women, obviously. I'm so excited for that adaptation. I'm not sure if we need another Narnia, but like if Greta wants to do it, do it.
Okay, I want to go on a little tangent here because you've seen Little Women, and she does really interesting stuff with the chronology of Little Women, where she shifts back and forth between their childhood and the modern day. And I wonder if she'll do that with Narnia, because I think that would be really interesting to see if she does the same exact thing, even where you are like contrasting the kids in the real world versus the kids in Narnia. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things you could do with
that. Would be incredible and would be really fresh. That sounds like something she could really. Yeah, that's a great call. Because what I think the character that really like sings in Little Women that has a lot of trouble, I think it's Amy, right? That's what. Yeah. Amy, in a lot of it, I have not read Little Women. I'm so sorry to my fans. Actually, I have a Little Woman story afterwards. But I would say in the the movie, I feel like, and other movies I've seen, Amy really suffers because like she's like this bratty kid, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're supposed to understand that she ends up with, what happens.
Yeah.
And it's always frustrating in other Little Women's that I've seen. And this one like worked really well for me because they did that.
Yeah, I love Gerwig's Little Women. That's like the one movie I remember. Okay, this is TMI, but I was going through a breakup after the movie came out, and I went to go watch it in the movie theater. And it's the only movie to this day that I've gone and watched like in the movie theater multiple times. And I love Gerwig as well, so I have complete faith in her. But yeah, did you end up watching the adaptation again before this? Me neither.
I forgot until this morning. Rid made a joke when we were just talking amongst ourselves before this that she was watching the movie, and I was like, "Oh shit, we were gonna do that."
No, yeah, I
I
forgot.
still kind of want to because I remember actually like it came out in like what 04 or something like that. So I was like in middle school, something along the. I was a little too old for it to be like super exciting, but I still remember being like, "Oh, that's kind of fun." I had a crush on Susan. I remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I remember from that, but I feel like I should watch it again.
Yeah, I actually was going to say earlier that the movie and the books are very intertwined in my head. So like the imagery of Lucy in the wardrobe and the lamppost, like when I think of that, I think of the movie because it came out in 2004, and I think I probably watched the movie before I read the book. Because I was like 6 years old when the movie came out. So yeah, like for me the movie and the book are actually very deeply intertwined.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it is a very, if I remember correctly, like faithful adaptation. Like even
Yes.
down to some
Yeah.
lines, like it was not an interpretation, which actually I generally don't like with movies, but I think for a kid's book, it's helpful, especially when it's so intertwined, I guess, with your experience.
Yeah.
Have you seen Frances Ha, by the way, since you love Greta Gerwig? I know
I haven't. No.
you should watch Frances Ha. You would love it. So she wrote it and she stars in it. She didn't direct it. Noah Baumbach directed it. It's such a vibe, Rid. And I know
I would love it because I love Adam Driver, and I think he's in that as well, right?
yes, he is in it.
Yeah.
If I remember, yeah, he's like a small part because mostly it's like you're just on Greta the whole time. It's a vibe. You should watch it. Report back to us at some point during the read along.
We're gonna turn this into a Greta Gerwig watch along instead of
Narnia. Great idea. Next month we're talking Prince Caspian and Frances Ha.
We're like the only people on Earth who would actually be
like, wait, what?
The intersection of like film and fantasy fans.
Yeah, that would not be well watched, but I would enjoy it. All right, so we are one chapter into this book so far. Lucy goes into Narnia, and I remember this being like in my head such a like pivotal thing of like her and Tumnus having tea in the cave, and like how cozy it was, all the toast that they had, like just felt like the most fun thing you could ever do is go into Narnia, meet a fawn, and have tea with him.
Yeah, I think throughout the book, something that I found really endearing was how they always just find a way to have tea. Like even towards the end after the battle, there's a line where they're like, where Lewis is like, well, I don't know how he did it, but Aslan like fixed up a high tea and they all had tea after this battle. And yeah, there is a definite sense of coziness to that.
Don't forget, we are British.
Yeah, but I will say, so I was reading the Tolkien paper that I was referencing, and so apparently Tolkien did not like this scene, and it's specifically because of mentions of Mr. Tumnus has these books that are called the like what are they called? It's like called Nymphs and Their Ways, where it's like sort of like meant to be an in-world science textbook about nymphs, and he like really disliked that because he was like it doesn't make any sense, and like it's not respecting like the secondary world enough, is what he said, or what someone said he said, because this was all like hearsay basically that this author is collecting. And I found that kind of interesting because so J.R.R. Tolkien wrote The Hobbit, which is also a children's book.
Wait, what?
And Lewis wrote these books, but I found out basically that I think Lewis wrote these books much more quickly than Tolkien wrote The Hobbit, or as because Tolkien developed the world of Middle Earth like over decades, and Lewis just kind of like threw these books together almost. And I think the sense that I got was that he didn't really take this as seriously as Tolkien would have liked, and he really disliked that detail about the scene. And also, there's another quote from like I don't remember who exactly it was, but it was someone named Christopher, but not Christopher Tolkien. But anyways, they were like, if Lucy had met a faun, who are typically associated with like lust and these things in Greek mythology, like it wouldn't have gone down like that, basically.
Yeah.
And talking about how Lewis is very fast and loose with his depictions of these mythological creatures, and how he completely like does not depict them the way that they would be historically depicted.
Yeah. So I have a searchable little thing here I have. So the line that it's just one sentence, but you're right. It's describing, there's a door that led to Mr. Tumnus's bedroom, a wall full of books. Lucy looked at those while he was setting out the tea things. They had titles like The Life and Letters of Silenus, or Nymphs and Their Ways, or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers, A Study in Popular Legend, or Is Man a Myth? That's the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just like, those are a bunch of mythologies mentioned. And it is interesting that like Tolkien is such a perfectionist. Like famously, I think restarted and destroyed like 3 different editions of like the Lord of the Rings. And obviously like created languages, like he's such a detailed person, and really cared about the mythology, and in many ways thought he was creating like a mythology of England. It didn't really exist because they borrowed a lot of their mythology either from France or like the Scandinavian peoples because of the invasions. But it's so funny because like I think there's strength. Basically, what I'm saying is I think there's strength in both. Like I think C.S. Lewis just being like, yeah, sure, like these are cool looking creatures. She met one. He's nice. He's got parcels. They have tea. You know what I mean? And also like the very heavy, obviously, Lord of the Rings is like with Malazan, like my favorite books of all time. So there's like places for both, I feel like.
Yeah. And so like another thing that Tolkien didn't like about Lewis's work was that he like would borrow mythology and then just completely divorce it from its like origins. And I completely forgot where I was going with this thought. But anyways, we can move on. I just completely forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, I find that really interesting.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. One thing I want to talk about with the Mr. Tumnus thing is an interesting tension, I feel, because I think both of us would agree one of the major things we struggled with in this book is the place of the girls and women generally in the narrative. I think certainly Lewis believed in like traditional gender roles and wanted that to be sort of part of his storytelling, is trying to find a way to explain that in like a acceptable way. Like it feels like he keeps kind of like making arguments for it. But at the same time, I think the best character in this book, hands down, is Lucy. Really? That's what I think. I think she's given the most personality. She is the one who kind of pushes back the most. Like she's the one to Father Christmas that's like, I think I'm courageous enough to be in battle. You know what I mean? Like she has kind of, I don't know, she seems the most filled out. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think Lucy definitely is one of the stronger of the siblings, but I would say my favorite character was Edmund, because I think he is the greatest source of conflict and friction in the book. And we can talk more about Edmund at some point in this chat, but I do really like Lucy, and I guess this time around reading this book, I knew that Lewis was the way he was about women, and even when I read like Lord of the Rings, I kind of accept that and I'm able to set it aside, and it doesn't really factor into my reading or enjoyment. Like when I say I didn't enjoy this book as much, it has nothing to do with like Lewis's depiction of the girls. It's I guess I'm just able to set that aside and like filter it through. Though I know like for a lot of people, it's like something they can't turn off when they're reading it.
Yeah, I think, and I do think it's something that I thought of a lot. Oh, hi, Anita. As I was reading, especially I mean, like the Father Christmas scene is like so obvious.
Hmm.
Women in combat, and then that followed by Susan fainting in a tree
Hmm.
is like a very like aggressive form of that.
Hmm.
And we're not given the character development of like when they actually are kings and queens, how that actually developed. Like there's obviously 4 of them. They're not married because they're siblings. Like how did the ruling actually work is a little unclear. You know what I mean? Like a lot of those questions are sort of left, like those final questions are left unclear.
Yeah.
Although even in the descriptions, it's like Peter, you know, is like a high. I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves. Peter's like a high king. Edmund is like a judge, and then Susan and Lucy are really beautiful, and people want to marry them. Like is how
Hmm.
the description are at the end of the book, which is like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I think the Father Christmas scene as well was frustrating to me because uh and you've alluded to this in your review about how like passive the children are basically,
Mhm.
and that really differs from like a lot of other children's books where kids are sort of divorced from their parents and they get to be in this environment where they are like the ones making things happen. But in this book there's really only one moment of like I would say agency, and that's when Edmund decides to leave the beaver's house and he sets off on his own to go find the white witch, and that's the only like that's really the only time one of the kids doesn't accidentally fall into uh like plot line, you know, like Lucy looking like finding Narnia is sort of accidental, and then she's immediately like has a guide with her, Mr. Tumnus, but that's really the only time that Edmund is alone and any of the children are alone and make a decision of their own. And I think that's why Edmund is my favorite in this book, because he has that sort of intrinsic quality of him of like doing something active, even though that is the sort of act that is the worst in this book, or like is considered the morally bad, when he goes to seek out the white witch and he's like punished for it, um, which I think speaks to the overall morality of what Lewis is saying with this book is like don't strike out on your own, like don't don't think for yourself, or like,
Stay
that
in line.
might be a simplification of what's happening, but yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Edmund. Our next chapter is him and the White Witch in the meeting and all that happening. I don't know if we want to like say anything about that, but like Edmund is, it's very interesting. We don't get a lot of sort of the inner lives of each of the children, but Edmund we
Mhm.
probably get the most, specifically that he like feels sort of like judged by Peter.
Mhm.
He really wants to prove himself, and he feels like he's overshadowed, and so like very much like that's what the White Witch kind of plays on, like making him feel important and kind of drags him into this whole thing.
Yeah.
But I do think the one thing I wanted to touch on in the scene that I don't think I even did in my review that I forgot about is it's a weird, in like a good way, like the way that Lewis describes the witch is actually very sensual. Did you notice that when you were reading it?
I don't know if I did,
So let
but
me,
I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah, which is very hard to do in like a children's book, obviously, but like that's a part of human experience, and I think a part of like her allure is always to be like, um, uh, you know, like beautiful, you know, like
Yeah.
in some ways, you know, as Galadriel would say, beautiful and terrible as the dawn, but like
Mhm.
it's tempting to come to her because she looks good, right? Like
Yeah.
the idea that like Satan is a Christian idea is like Satan is like an actual angel of light and beautiful.
Mhm.
I think that's I'm trying to find, sorry. Okay, but behind him, so this is the description of the witch from Edmund, but behind the dwarf, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She also was covered in white fur up to her throat and held a
Mm.
long, straight, golden wand in her right hand and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow or paper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. So it's
Yeah.
like, again, I think he's such a great writer in The Economy of Word. There's like two things that maybe this is just like from a man's perspective or someone who was a boy, but like specifically that this polar bear fur went up to her throat, and then highlighting this very red mouth is like, from a child's perspective, kind of like a sensual description of like a temptress. I don't know. That's
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Because later on, she's also, I think she's described as being a child of Lilith. In the scene where Mr. Beaver is talking about how she's a djinn. And I think Lilith is, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Lilith is considered to be sort of like that temptress, associated with like sexuality and sin kind of figure. So I definitely see that coming through.
And this is another uh problematic part of there's definitely like an east-west division in descriptions of the witch and who she is. So Lilith, if I'm correct, I think is like another sort of like broadly Mesopotamian myth, or and in some myths like a Jewish myth, like the first wife of Adam. That's too much to get into, but like that the description of the White Witch is like she is from the East. Like, you know, a jinn is like a magical creature from Persian mythology, and like Lilith is from that area, whereas, you know, everything else feels very Western. And I think I think it's 1950s English man. Like, I think
it's not surprising. And yeah, that was the one thing that I noticed during our Discord read along, where I was like keeping a eagle eye out for mentions of that, because it's, you know, the White Witch is described as a djinn, and then also what she offers to Edmund is the Turkish delight, again, sort of like a Eastern associated thing. And one of the articles I read about Narnia that I found really interesting brought up a cool point, or like a different reading of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Is, instead of being, or, you know, obviously it is Christian allegory, but in addition to that, reading Aslan as an allegory for the British Empire, and how that shifts and changes, and how like by the end of the series, in the last battle, Aslan is like much weaker. Obviously that's getting into later books, but I found that really interesting. And I think that that's something I'm keeping an eye on as we read the series, is reading Aslan as not just a Christian allegory, but as well like a allegory for the British Empire.
Rid, can you post that in our Discord read along, that article? That sounds, love to read that. And a little blip, join our Discord read along. It's been really cool. And thank you that we have a lot of people in the chat who have been chatting there. It's been super, like, I don't know, like informative and fun to do while reading, especially a book like Narnia that, like, it's not like the most complicated book in the world where we're like talking about plot points, but like reflections on it. It's really cool to see other people's reflections. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, the link is in the description. And also, like, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a very simple book, but as we're talking about it, there are so many, like, there's so much to mine there with even the dynamics of the siblings, like Edmund, and the allusions to his resentment of Peter. And like, it makes me think, like, I wonder how their parents are. Like, do they compare Edmund to Peter a lot? And is that why he has this resentment? Or is he like, he's sort of like the scapegoat of the family in a way? And is that why he acts out? It's really fun to read.
And it is interesting, as you talk about, some of the reading does feel like don't step out of line, right? Sorry, my phone just started ringing. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
So there is like a certain part of that, but also really interestingly, we never hear from their parents or about their parents in this book at all. I don't think there's not even a mention of them, which just seems very odd to like the authority structure of England. Like that, like we don't get anything from there. Like the authority figure is the professor, who actually, by the way, fast forwarding a little bit, one of my favorite scenes is when Lucy is telling them all about Narnia and is despondent, and the older ones get concerned about her and go to the professor, and like an authority figure just like listening to children and just being like, yeah, maybe, you know what I mean? And like with no judgment. And we find out later on like why this person, the professor, might do it like this. But even just like, again, in our world where authority figures almost never listen to children when they have concerns, and sometimes in terrible ways, like just that scene is like, I don't know. I felt it was so powerful. That was one of my most powerful like readings through here. That scene where the professor is just like, how do you know? Maybe she is right, or like the best thing might be just to listen to her. Or like, it's just like, professor, yes.
Yeah, I really liked the professor, and when I was I feel like Lucy believing in Narnia is an interesting metaphor for like faith in general, and for all my like criticisms of this book, I do find there to be like something really beautiful about the discussion of faith, and it's hard to divorce like religion from um like the real world in that way. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but I think that came up for me while I was reading this book, is like trying to separate out like the actual story of the Bible and like the actual story of Jesus versus like how people use that in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And like there is something to appreciate about that, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good parallel. And even in this book, I think there is some question of like the realness of Narnia, because like when they come back, they're the same people, it's the same time. And I think there's probably a reading of it that like, it's not real, or it is like it's all an imaginative like thing that they had. But that's not my favorite reading of it. But there's like, I don't know what I'm trying to say either. But like that parallel between real and not real faith and our world and the things. Sorry, there was some. I'm trying to read comments while I'm talking, and that's not a good.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just like, I'm not as good as Jimmy is at balancing the chat and the live discussion. So I'm
out of coffee, so I'm gonna go get coffee. But I'm listening. Okay. Put some.
Okay. Magus Markellen asked, did anyone think Lucy was being a bit presumptuous for repeatedly returning to Tumnus? I know they need a guide to a new land, but it does put his life in danger again. LOL. I don't remember exactly how this went down, but I do think the yeah, that's an interesting point about Lucy returning to Mr. Tumnus. Does she know at that point that he's not supposed to talk to her, or does she find that out on their second meeting?
Don't remember. On the first meeting.
Okay, never mind then.
Because remember, he's like he cries and he's like, "I'm a bad fawn."
And then he lets her go.
So she knows that.
Yeah.
I think she is. I mean, I think she's just a kid. She's like, "We're here. Come meet my friend."
She doesn't know where else to go.
And she hasn't had a contact with the danger. Mm-hmm. We have, because we've met the White Witch through Edmund. Mm-hmm. Sorry, my coffee machine is being very loud right now.
It's not that loud.
Oh, great. But like she hasn't. So I wonder if Lucy just hasn't put together the danger.
Yeah, that would be interesting to go back and look at, because something that I was thinking of was Edmund doesn't know on his first meeting with the White Witch that she's supposed to be evil. And I think that is an interesting thing to look at, is like how is he supposed to know that she's evil,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was done. That was
I think the interesting thing from a reader perspective, at least for me, like they make a big deal about that he like went to the witch and ate her food or whatever, but like as you said, like how is he supposed to know she's bad? He's a kid in the woods with a dwarf and a huge like white witch. What's he supposed to do? Yeah. But then I think the thing that he needs the most like redemption for, so to speak, is when he lies and doesn't back.
Yeah.
Which like Aslan doesn't talk about at all. But like from a reader perspective, for me, that is the biggest like bad thing Edmund does, or betrayal, I should say.
Yeah.
That Edmund does. Like I don't like his whole thing with the White Witch. He's in some ways enchanted, and it's like, what's he supposed to do in that scenario?
What he does,
that feels like a betrayal.
What he does with the White Witch, or like, it's literally the same thing as Lucy finding Mr. Tumnus and then like having tea with him. I mean, it's, she doesn't know that Mr. Tumnus is good or bad. She just kind of assumes, and I guess Edmund does the same. The thing with Edmund that I didn't like, and this is sort of where the narrator voice wasn't my favorite. When Edmund comes back with Aslan after he's been rescued from the White Witch. They have the conversation about, and we don't know because the narrator voice just says like they have a conversation and the children don't hear what Aslan and him and Edmund talk about. And to me, that was really frustrating because I feel like that conversation is the most important conversation in the whole book
Yep.
because it is Edmund coming back. And what do they talk about? Do they talk about forgiveness, or does Edmund say sorry? Does he, like, what is that conversation like? And if I was reading this to my kid, that was the conversation that I would want them to learn from and be like, hey, if you mess up in life, which you probably will at some point, this is what you do. Like, I don't know, but like that conversation isn't on the page and it's sort of glossed over. And I guess that frustrated me about the narrator voice.
And even when Aslan comes back with Edmund and he says to the children, like, there's no need to talk about what he's done before. Do you remember?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, but why? That's the most important thing. Like, we should talk about that.
I completely, and this kind of goes to a lot on my review. I go through this, but like, it's interesting reading this, reflecting on, and this is from my background also, evangelical Christianity generally in the United States. They focus so much on Jesus and what he did and his death on the cross and resurrection, and that like he saves us. And we can maybe talk about, if we want to talk about other things involved in that, in Aslan dying in this book, but so focused on that there's like no focus on personal growth, choices we make in light of that to make the world better, and like that wrong things like that we do, even if you're redeemed or if you have faith through it and whatever your particular thing, and like you don't talk about they still have consequences. Like there's still like redemption to those that you harmed, and restitution. And like this is like what we've talked about Malazan before, so strong in this about the complex nature of like doing wrong things and how to live in light of that in community and being actually redeemed and forgiveness and not making that a hollow concept. This is the opposite end where it does feel very hollow. It's like Aslan does everything. Yeah. Don't talk about it. It's fine. And even in the narrative, it's kind of that way. The kids are passive the whole time. Just Aslan does it. Yeah. And then like we don't know anything about the choices they make as kings and queens in response to what Aslan has done. And I think that is a pretty kind of damning indictment from my perspective as someone who left evangelical Christianity. Yeah. One of like the major reasons why is because there's no connection there, and it felt very hollow because of that.
Yeah. And I think that is why I didn't enjoy it this much this time around as an adult reading it, because I was like, if I take this on face value, what he's saying is like, if you follow the right people, you will be fine. Like, like that it's not about like you have to be good people because of some intrinsic thing, your internal moral compass. It's about like, just follow Aslan and everything will work out. And like comparing that to something like The Hobbit, where it's a lot more morally complex as a children's book, where Bilbo, basically saves Gollum's life, even though he could have killed him. Like that decision is so fraught and has so many like implications. And like, why does Bilbo pity Gollum? Why is he merciful? That sort of emotional complexity and moral complexity is not in this book. But yeah, that's a little where was I going with that?
No, I 100% agree with you. Like The Hobbit, even though The Hobbit does have some elements of like Gandalf pushes the story forward and sometimes saves them obviously from like the troll and the goblins, but like they're making choices that go to those places every single time. There's huge character growth in Bilbo, even in a children's tale. Yeah. And maybe I should read The Hobbit again. It's been a long time.
I was going to say, so I really want to read The Hobbit, and I also want to read George MacDonald, because those are two of Lewis's contemporaries. And I feel like it would be, again, interesting to read, to triangulate Lewis and read the context around him as well. But yeah, like the point about Gandalf, you're allowed to have guides. Like it's not like they have to be completely like self-starters in the story. But I think
Aslan, the character, can exist.
yeah, like, and this is another thought I had is about like Deus Ex Machina, which is huge in Lord of the Rings. And it's because Bilbo took that first step of leaving his comfortable home and took that from some internal motivation of his to go on an adventure. That, and then like, you know, the choices that the dwarves make and like they're striving and trying to achieve something. When the eagles come and save the day, that Deus Ex Machina feels like it feels justified and like, oh, like they deserved that. Whereas like when Aslan comes and like breathes on all the statues and like, you know, saves the day, the question that comes up for me was, why didn't he do this earlier? Why did it take like these human kids coming around? And I think he talks about this, Lewis talks about this in later books. But that's the question that comes up for me is, why didn't, if he could have done this all along, why didn't he do it earlier, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a huge, and I keep mentioning this review, sorry, but I just like put thought into this review. But like that's that problem with Christianity generally is like, why did God make the world like this with all these things? Why hasn't he acted earlier? If Jesus can take away the sins of everybody, why isn't everyone in on this? Like why is this set up like that? And there's this conversation between the witch and the lion, Aslan, about this, where she's like, you know, the deep magic, I own all the traders. And as a reader, like, wait, what? why do we set this up like this?
Yeah.
But Aslan's just like, yeah, you're right. That's, you know, what the emperor did. But there's a deeper, later on, he's like, there's deeper magic. And you're like, deeper magic is that like you die on the stone table and then like Edmund's cool. It's both the mechanics and the like metaphysic reality that is built up. If you kind of take a moment to think about it, you're kind of like, there's a lot of tension here. And it's true in the narrative as well.
Yeah, it's like all the problems I have with this book are problems I have with, or no, I don't know if problems is the right way, but like questions I have about religion in general or Christianity in general, which is interesting. But yeah.
And it's interesting talking about Tolkien. I always love talking about one of my favorite terms. Have you heard, or he did this in an essay called On Fairy Stories about the idea of eucatastrophe?
That does ring a bell, but I would love a refresher.
So so people would ask him about this, right? And he never liked to call it a Deus Ex Machina because that has a very particular term. What he would say is on fairy stories, he created this term called eucatastrophe. Eu is a prefix in Greek meaning good. So it's basically like translates roughly to good catastrophe. It's basically like at the end of a story, a sudden turn of good fortune that may or may not be earned by the actions of the hero, but something that gives that final resolution. And he talks about how that is a really key part of how he views storytelling, because you have to have conflict. And if just your heroes overcome the conflict completely, that's not actually super compelling most of the time. Like, your favorite stories, it's usually not just one guy gets powerful enough to, you know, save the day. It's normally a combination of a lot of different factors, and Tolkien talks about that. And so it's interesting because, like, in some ways there's some eucatastrophe, but it's almost like too much in this, where there's no agency of our heroes.
Yeah, it's just good stuff happening the whole time. Holly brings up an interesting point. He says that he thought that Edmund and not Susan should have seen Aslan at the stone table. That is a really interesting point.
I think narratively that makes sense. I wonder if what Lewis is doing there is, in the Passion story, it is the women who see Jesus's resurrection first. Mary Magdalene and a couple other, she's the only named one, but like sees Jesus first. So I don't know if that's like a parallel he's going for, especially kind of, I think, again, talking about like, I think he's thoughtfully trying to like give a place for women in the story, while also his storytelling bias kind of gives the two boys like the most like heroic moments. Like Edmund's redemption, and Peter's the only one who like kills somebody. kills the wolf.
The wolf.
Maybe that's why. But Javi, I think it's a great point that like the one who like really caused this, so to speak, in this story is not the one who's there to feel it.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder to a certain extent if Lewis is like wanting to keep the allegory going, like prevents the story from going to more interesting places like that, where Edmund instead of Susan, and Lucy watching the death of Aslan.
Yeah. How did you feel about that whole scene of them following him in the morning and he gets sad and he's like, as a cat owner, I was like, oh.
I do love that scene. I think that it is really emotional. And that's where I was like sort of talking about earlier, the like beauty of Christian mythology, or like this Christian story of Jesus. Like, I think that is a really beautiful, it's just a beautiful story of like sacrifice, and that, you know, Aslan would give himself up, and yet the metaphysics of it, or like somehow he comes back because he didn't deserve to die. Like, I find that really beautiful, and the way that Lewis describes it, and the mice come out to eat away his cords, it's sort of just very iconic, honestly. And I love reading that.
Yeah, I think one of the most beautiful parts of the Christian story is the incarnation. This, this idea that this perfect, good, all-powerful God would see the plight of humanity and then come down and just be one of us to help us overcome it, is like this really beautiful idea, I think. And yeah, that this scene, like where Aslan shows that vulnerability, really has that emotional tie for sure.
Yeah. And
I forgot about that. You're right. They're like, don't tell him. I forgot that had happened. It's kind of similar to what we were talking about before, where like we don't know what Edmund and Aslan talked about.
Yeah, it's like Edmund does quote unquote bad things, but then he never really has to face the consequences for it, just because he now follows Aslan. And I think that is where I dislike it, because I'm like, I think obviously we're all going to mess up at some point, but there needs to be some sort of like conversation, or like, you don't just sweep it under the rug kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, I probably shouldn't keep quoting Malazan, but in Toll the Hounds, there's this beautiful scene where basically one character says to another, like, it's Dana Manarake actually says, redemption or forgiveness without redemption is nothing at all.
Yeah.
And in some ways, Edmund feels like that because we don't have any of the hard part of that work.
Yeah. All right. What are you most looking forward to in the other books?
I'm excited. Well, I think the imagery and story, as I said, in like the other books are just much better. I like Prince Caspian is okay. It's a fun one. And there's other human characters that are very interesting, and it keeps building on its own mythology. And then as I think Lewis feels more, he makes it more mythological or more creative. He doesn't have to stay within like Christian story. Like this is a passion story very clearly, and he kind of stays within that lane. And that's why, by the way, the resolution at the end is like so quick. I think earlier you were saying like, it's nice how quickly we get into things and the economy of word, but the ending is just like, yep. And then breathe on some statues. We had this one battle, NBD. Now they're talking like Shakespeare, kings and queens, and they're back, and that's it. Whoop. And now like it feels like it just kind of ends. And I do feel that gets much better as there's less tied to that particular story. So Prince Caspian is good. Like, again, kind of the big like bangers, I think, is Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Horse and His Boy, Silver Chair, and Magician's Nephew. Those are like the ones that are just rich with imagery, really fascinating stories, and like incredibly creative. And so I'm honestly, I like language horror, but I'm kind of happy that it is behind us.
Me too. I'm surprised because for some reason I thought this was like the most iconic one. This was like the one that I remember the most, but I'm actually really excited for the other books. And I'm curious to see what my ranking will be at the end.
Yeah, I am as well. Yeah, any final thoughts on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? This is good. Oh, wait, real quick, as we talk about other books, do you remember one that is like, if you had to say now, you're most looking forward to rereading?
I think The Magician's Nephew, because again, I love the world between the worlds aspect of it. And yeah, this is a tangent again, but I would really love to see you read the Magician's Trilogy by Lev Grossman, because that trilogy is it's like a deconstruction of Narnia in some ways. And I love that trilogy. So I would love to see what you think of it after reading Narnia again.
Speaking of the Dandelion Dynasty and Nat being a negative effect on you, my partner had a negative effect on me on that. Anna read The Magicians and was like, I don't really like. She really was like not a fan of like how it was built out. So that's why I've never read it. But you know,
but Anna also doesn't like Malazan.
Oh, I know, it breaks my heart. Yeah, Anna, if people didn't know, not just doesn't like Malazan, like despises Malazan. And because anyway, I don't have to go into it. It's so sad. Again, you got to love people for their whole selves, and sometimes parts of them that it's tough. But
Anita says, I would love Long Price Quartet. Have you read any? Oh,
no,
you haven't.
This is one of the questions I asked. I was on Jimmy Nuts last night. It's like a live weekend. And I asked him, like, which one would you think I should go for? Long Price Quartet or The Dagger and the Coin? And he kind of struggled, but he thought Dagger and the Coin would be a better place to start. I obviously, you have loved your recent experience with Dagger and Coin, but haven't read Long Price Quartet. But I think your description of Dagger and Coin like really drew me in, and that's stuff that I've been wanting to see in more fantasy, sort of the more political, economical side of things.
Yeah. Interesting. Hello, Reichardt. Sons of Adam and Daughters of Eve. Dawn Treader, Magician's Nephew, and Last Battle are my faves / most thought-provoking.
Also, Dawn Treader has like Edmund gets some great spotlight in that one, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm looking. I think Dawn Treader has one of the more iconic openings to a book.
The entrance into Narnia is excellent. And
yeah. The wood between the worlds is such a calm and peaceful setting. And it's just like, it has this sort of like, I don't know how to describe it, just this like magical, mystical feeling to it that has stayed with me for many years.
Oh, man. Magician's Nephew is such a like level up in like lore of Narnia. So much cool stuff, like the dying world, the red sun, I don't want to like give stuff away, but like it's like compared to Lion, the Wardrobe that I just read, like it is so different in tone in many ways.
Yeah. More love for the Long Price Quartet. Yes.
Yeah. I would say he is heroic in Dawn Treader.
Oh, I forgot about Rippy Cheap. I'm excited to.
Rippy Cheap is great. Rippy Cheap is one of the best secondary characters, up there with Puddleglum, chair that I really like. Okay, I feel like we're winding down. One thing I want to return to, because I really like this idea. Should we read other Inklings while we're reading this? Like, do you want to do a Hobbit? Do you want to, like, as optional reading, everyone? We're not saying you have to, Rid and I, but like.
I think we should. Okay, so there's one George MacDonald story that directly inspired The White Witch, and I think it's called On the Back of the Wind, On the Back of the North Wind, and something like that. And I think we should read that one. And
At the Back of the North Wind.
Yeah, I read that inspired a lot of the Narnia stuff. So I think that would be interesting to read. And then maybe we should read The Hobbit. I mean, I've already read The Hobbit, but I'm always down to reread Tolkien.
Who read or who wrote The Hobbit again?
I think his name is J.R.R. something something.
What?
J.R.R. Lewis.
That's George Smith. Let's do because Prince Caspian has a little bit more White Witch stuff.
hmm
Do we want to do On the Back of the North Wind? That sounds
Yeah,
fun.
I'm down.
All right,
Honestly,
children, that's your assignment. Sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, the books are so short that it doesn't feel like a huge lift to read both of them at the same time.
It's also free on Google Books. You can download it.
Yeah, it's very old. J.R. Martin.
This says it's 397 pages.
Oh, wait.
Oh, no. That's a collection of.
Yeah, I think it's a short story.
Okay, I'll have to look. I shouldn't do this while I'm live. That's not a good use of time. Great. I'll let's do it. Unless I look it up and it's like a 400-page book, then I might negotiate with you. But I think that sounds very fun.
Yeah, and we don't have to read it like before next month. We have 7 months to enter into the Lewis cinematic universe.
Yes. And maybe I'll watch the movie. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. All right, Andy, thank you so much for doing this. This was so fun. And putting up with my rambles. Love learning from you about these things, and I'm excited to read the next book, which is
right back at you. Thank you for being a partner with me here. And despite the fact that you badmouth us in front of Jimmy, I'm happy to do this with you.
I don't know what you're talking about, but thank you to everyone in the chat as well. Really appreciate y'all coming out and hanging out with us. Check out Andy's channel, link in the description, and we'll see you next time. Take care.